Snow had fallen. Only the gallows frame stood black against the leaden sky. Black against white. The rooftops, rail tracks, and coal trucks had become starched pillows, plumped up and ample. An air of enchantment hung over cinder pits, denying the wretchedness. "Don't stand there gawping, boy! Get your boots on, or you'll be out in that snow barefoot." That was my father. "Is this it?" he said, sneering at the packet held out by my mother. "You've been given extra rations to this waster." Me. Jack. My mother ignored him, rubbed her swollen belly, and passed a smaller package to me. "You'd better not have another girl in there," he warned. "This boy's enough of a sissy for anybody." Those were the last words my mother would hear him say. He snatched the packet with one hand and shoved me through the door with the other, the drone of the pit hooter darkening his mood. I planted my feet carefully in the snowy hollows created by his boots and followed him to the pit head. 15 of us descended into the dark that day. My father and I were the last. I may not have been able to read, but I could count. I even knew that I was the youngest. 8 years old, a year younger than Elizabeth Harvard. I craned my neck for one last glimpse of a magical world where everything black was white, except my father's temper. "Move it, boy! Don't stand there gawping!" We mounted the clutch and swung into the dust-filled blackness. Tom Alsop warned me not to fall asleep. "Don't worry," I called after him. "Dav will keep me awake." I couldn't see the scowl on my father's face, but I knew it was there. "How many times do you need telling? There's no Dav in this pit." But if Dav had not been there, whistling his tunes and kicking out at the rats, the black would have swallowed me up, paralyzed me. As my father shoveled and trudged into blackness, I crouched by my trapdoor and smelled the sweat. It was the brush of chilled air on my cheek that first made that day different to any other. "Nothing to be afraid of, Jack." Dav's voice was firm as he rested his hand on my shoulder. But I felt the draft become a breeze, and the breeze become a gale. Above Wynavon, dark clouds had gathered. Just before noon, a downpour had begun. It had melted the snow in an instant and filled the river to bursting. But I knew none of that. I didn't hear the cries of the messengers or see the ashen faces of the colliers fleeing in their hundreds from the treacherous workings of Blaenavon. When the water came in, it came like rolling barrels of wool, foaming, battering my body before it like a leaf swept by a yard brush. Noise filled my head until I thought it would burst. The floor, the walls, the roof, all took it in turns to feast on my skin. There was no time to feel pain. The wave became an ocean and crashed over my head. I surrendered to the force of the current. Then, his hand grasped my arm, dragging me to the surface. "Keep still," he commanded. Desperately, I sucked air into my lungs. I lunged forward towards his head, but it disappeared beneath the surface. But then his strong hands clamped my legs onto his shoulders, and his head emerged briefly between my legs. "Watch for the Clatch," he spluttered, and plunged beneath the torrent once again. Less than a foot of space now existed between the surface of the water and the arched roof of the tunnel. I clung to Dav's hair as he held me aloft, and heaved my body in the direction of the main shaft. Just when I thought it would be impossible for him to remain submerged a second longer, I heard voices echoing through the darkness. "Anybody there?" "Help! It's Jack!" I called feebly. "And Dav!" "Hang on, boy!" shouted an urgent voice. "Pull yourself up on the bar!" I felt one last surge of strength as Dav lifted me onto the Clatch. I had never ridden it alone before. I had always straddled my father's thighs and held tightly on to his coat lapels. The iron rope bit into my hands as the winding gear slowly, painfully, hauled me to the surface. Strained faces greeted me, slapped me on the back, wrapped blankets around me, carried me to my mother. She wept, clasping me to her despite her rounded belly. The snow had gone. The magic had gone. "Dav!" I said. "Send the Clatch down for Dav!" But nobody listened. An account of the tragedy appeared in the Monmouthshire Merlin a few days later. An 8-year-old boy was the only survivor of the 1838 Cinder Pits disaster. 14 souls were lost. The burial register in St. Peter's Church showed the actual death toll to have been 15. None of them were called Dav.